coach Matt LaFleur was in front of the media for his season-ending press conference. A lot of focus on the rough end to the campaign that saw them lose 3 straight and really struggle offensively. Much of the blame has landed at the feet of quarterback Jordan Love, who threw 3 interceptions in the loss to Philly. But LaFleur refused to say it was only on the second-year starter.
Do I think he can play better? Absolutely. Do I think I can help him out and be better? Absolutely. Do I think we can play better around him? Absolutely. I just think it's too much to put it on one person. I really do. I think collectively we have to be better, and I expect better. We performed at a pretty high level the majority of the season and then took a dive.
LaFleur said he had not spoken with all the players yet as they get ready to head their different ways in the offseason, but will over the next few weeks. He did say that quarterbacks coach Tom Clements is retiring. Spent a total of 14 seasons with the Packers over 2 different stints, including the last 3 under LaFleur. He said there's a possibility that the replacement will come from within.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, Wisconsin going to play as a ranked team for the first time since early December tonight when they face Ohio State. Badgers re-entered the top 25 yesterday at number 24 following 5 straight wins, including 3 in Big Ten play. Tip tonight, the Kohl Center is slated for 8 o'clock. And the Bucs also back in action as the Kings come to Fiserv Forum. Tip there is at 7. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
These are the games that matter. He knows that. Every quarterback that plays in this league knows that. And when you get into these games, that's what you're judged on. And it's not all on him. There were a lot of people that contributed to them not playing better last week and then again this week. But ultimately, the quarterback, especially more so in today's game than ever before, the quarterback is expected to overcome those things. And so it's a tough way to finish. I said it during the ball game. It doesn't really matter if you win 14 games. Not that you got to go win the Super Bowl because only one team gets to do that. But when you don't even win a playoff game, you're lumped in with all the teams really that didn't even make the postseason. So this is a tough one. And for Kevin O'Connell with a good team again this year, had one 2 years ago, to come away without a playoff victory is a hard pill to swallow.
2 receivers left. Rams blitz. Darnold gets away from it. Steps up in the pocket. He's holding it too long. Just run. Throw it, man. Just run. At the 25-yard line, he's sacked for a 5th time.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Little Paul Allen audio from last night. I was just combing the internet trying to find Paul Allen audio. It's so hard to find radio audio. I don't know where people get it, but I found it on Twitter. Someone had a good montage, I think, of every Sam Darnold sack last night. And I play that clip from Paul Allen. Not really. It's just an awesome call. That's just an incredible throw. I love when Paul Allen breaks from the game action to interject a fan thing, only to then get back to the call. Very good announcer, even if he's a big homer and he's a homer for a team that's a rival. It was fun to watch the Vikings lose last night, but as I said, over the last week or two, I didn't really personally have a problem with anyone on this Vikings team. There have been previous Vikings teams, like when Anthony Barr and Zimmer and Sendejo and Diggs, those guys bothered me. Like, that was a nastier rivalry in that era of Vikings football. I don't really have anything personally against this Vikings team, and I wasn't jumping up and down watching them lose. However, I do feel better living in a world today where it doesn't feel like the Vikings are leaps and bounds ahead of my team. Does that make sense? So it was fun to watch a rival lose, and if you're a Vikings fan, sorry, that's a crummy way to have the season end. But it's not really personal the way that it would have been. Like when the Vikings lost in Philly in, was that 2017 in the NFC Championship game? That was personal. I wanted to see the guys on that team fail. Vikings fans, you get it. You guys didn't like Rodgers. There were plenty of Packers you didn't like. This isn't me being a child. This is me being a sports fan. I didn't really have anything personal against this Vikings team. I just didn't want to live in a world in which the Vikings and the Lions are advancing rounds and rounds and rounds past my team. So that's why I felt a little joy last night. That call, it's not really, what's the phrase is Schadenfreude, when you get joy from someone else's pain. I'm not really getting joy from Paul Allen there. That's just an unbelievable call. Like, I don't know how you feel about Paul Allen. That's just an amazing radio call.
He's holding it too long. Just run. Throw it, man.
Throw it, man. Like, Paul, he's a hell of an announcer. He's awesome. Great announcer, even if he calls games for our rivals. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. We're going to talk about the Packers. I have a lot of Matt LaFleur audio to get to today from his press conference. He did 40 minutes, his end-of-season press conference earlier today. And I noticed two themes in the presser. I have about 10 cuts that I edited this afternoon, and I put the cuts into two folders. They're both getting at different themes. Both of the themes annoy me. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. Also, plenty of time for your phone calls tonight as well, and time for Mike Clemens at 5:30 because it's Tuesday, and he is back safely from Philadelphia. I texted him earlier today because I always feel like such a jerk. Like, 5:30, you good for 5:30? You good for 5:30? He's up early, running through airports, like trying to get home. Like, the last thing that Mike Clemens should be worried about some days is making sure he can call into my dumb radio show at 5:30. So sometimes I feel like a jerk. Are you back yet? Like, come on. Did you get your rental car returned? Like, come on, Mike. But he is back, and he'll be able to join us at 5:30. I'm excited to talk with Mike. 608-321-1670. The number, mark that down so you're ready to go if you have anything to add to the show. And you can also comment on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Wisco Grant. I want to talk a couple of minutes about last night's game. That's why live radio is great, is we can react to the thing that we all watched last night or the thing that we watched today in terms of Matt LaFleur's presser, which we'll get to in a minute. Like I said, last night, all I could think about watching that game is coaching. Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay. Because coming into this game, consider the stakes. Consider our vibe around the Rams and our vibe around the Vikings coming into this game. The Vikings, until last week against the Lions, looked unstoppable coming off that win over the Packers. That felt like such a windfall moment. That felt so significant when not only did they beat the Packers, but they kind of handled them. And then there was a big celebration in the locker room with Sam Darnold. What a game he played. And it kind of felt like, man, the Vikings have their guy. Right? They feel like this Vikings team feels like they might be different. And I saw stories from Arif Hassan, who's been on the show, and Matt Collar, who's been on the show. We got to get him on at some point. I don't want to bother him this week because he's busy with Viking stuff. Maybe at the Super Bowl, certainly. If he's there again, we'll get him in person. Because I love Matt. Great book that you should get. Football is a numbers game as well. Purple Insider. I was watching some of his post-game report from last night when I was making breakfast this morning. But all the stories were being written about the Vikings after that Packer game. Believe in this team. This team is the real deal. They have talent. Look at all of these smart one-year additions. Andrew Van Ginkel, they brought in Cashman. I could be wrong. Blake Cashman, and there were others along that defensive. They just did such a good job building that team. Flores is awesome. O'Connell is awesome. Darnold's having a great season. Look at these receivers. Aaron Jones has been great. Felt like this is a team that could do it. They have all the momentum. And they lost to the Lions last weekend, and it looked ugly. But I wasn't ready to stick a fork in the Vikings after that. The Lions are amazing, even with all their injuries. And they're really well coached. Their coordinators are great. So no shame in one really elite team losing to another really elite team. I thought the Vikings were still going to go, and I thought the Vikings were going to beat the Rams last night. I picked them on Bill's show. I thought the Vikings, especially in Phoenix, where there's a bunch of Vikings fans, there were going to be a lot of Vikings fans in LA. And then they moved it to Phoenix, where there's even more Vikings fans. Like, the last thing that we need in the Midwest, either in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, oh, you're telling me I have an excuse to go to Arizona in January? Like, yeah. Plus, there's just not that many Rams fans. So the environment was going to be, I thought the Vikings were going to win. The Rams, on the other hand, they hadn't really looked all that awesome down the stretch. We all think that Stafford is great, and we all think McVay is great, and we all think Puka Nacua is great, and they got a young talent on defense. But over the last week or two, I didn't feel like the Rams were about to launch into some Super Bowl run. Kupp looks old. Kupp looks really old. And Blake Corum's hurt. And it felt to me like this team has got a lot of young talent, and they're certainly well on their way, but this doesn't feel like their year. And then Sean McVay had every player on the Rams locked and loaded, ready to come out and absolutely punch the Vikings in the face. In fact, if not for a roughing the punter call, which I thought was kind of iffy, but whatever, and a personal foul call that the Rams committed on offense, which backed them up for a field goal, the Rams probably should have been leading by more at halftime. The Rams were up 24-3 at halftime, and they probably should have been leading by more based on some of the things that happened. They got a defensive score, and like, I don't think the halftime score is misleading. The Rams were dominating, and the score reflected that. But the Vikings were lucky to only be down 21 points at halftime because of a couple, personal foul penalties, a roughing the punter penalty that extended a Vikings drive and prevented the Rams from getting the ball back. The attitude and the approach and the energy with which the Rams were ready to go from the opening kick, especially considering everything that's gone on in LA and everything that's taken place in LA. And look, this isn't a political statement, but I think that a lot of people around the country, when they see, oh, there's fires in LA, they think it's millionaires, billionaires, movie star. Like, Los Angeles County's got 10 million people. And a lot of the people who live there are working class. Like, it's not all movie stars. And some of it is movie stars, and that gets a lot of attention. But it's a lot of working people just like us who have had their family home. They've been displaced. They've had to evacuate. And in the case of the Rams, right, all of these players and coaches' families who don't live in mansions in Brentwood, they don't have beach houses. This isn't their vacation. That's where they live. That's where their kids go to school. They're all displaced. None of them know when they're going to be able to go back, when life is going to be normal again. And in that, I guess, environment, for lack of a better term, Sean McVay had that Rams team ready to go. And I think the expression that I heard, I don't know if it was on the broadcast last night or if I heard someone mention this on some sports talk I was listening on the way, and Sean McVay often says, I believe this is a McVay quote, you need to have your best when your best is required. And everybody, top to the bottom of the roster, offense to defense, everyone in the Rams was 10 out of 10 ready to go, ready with their best last night. And the Vikings were the opposite. And I think that's such a testament to McVay. I tweeted this last night. I believe this, that if Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid weren't currently paired together, that Sean McVay would widely be thought of as the best coach in the NFL. And I don't think it's close. Like, I don't think it's, if you were starting an NFL team today, to start your franchise with any other coach, not named Sean McVay, it would be stupid. It would be wrong. If you said you're starting a team today, pick your head coach, it would be McVay. And I don't, like, who else are you even arguing? Now, you could say Reid, but Reid is old. And also, again, I think Reid has benefited a ton from Mahomes, and I think Mahomes has benefited a ton from Reid. And in any walk of life, people who are super successful, they're good and they're hardworking, of course, but you need a little luck too, right? If you're a movie star, you need the right director to notice you and to provide you with the right role, right? Things have to come together. Things have to line up. If you're a musician, you need to have the right person believe in you and give you the record. You need to have the talent, obviously, but you need some things to intersect. So coaching's no different. I think Andy Reid at this stage in his career being paired with Patrick Mahomes, it's the perfect fit, not just because Mahomes is awesome, but that's the perfect quarterback for Andy Reid. He's very Mike Holmgren, and that it's kind of loose and there's room for improvisation and creativity and nothing's overly tight. He's not Belichick. He's not a disciplinarian. I don't know that he's a scheme detail lord like McVay or Shanahan or one of these kind of younger, tight-pantsed offensive coordinator guys. Perfect pairing. And now he has all of these championships to his name, to his resume, and Reid is considered the best guy in the NFL. But if Andy Reid never gets Patrick Mahomes, I think he's thought of as an excellent coach. But we're sitting here today talking about how Sean McVay is, with a bullet, the best coach in the NFL. He is so good. And it's not just his offensive scheme, right? With all of these McVay clones that we've got over the years. Started with LaFleur and Zach Taylor and Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan was great before, but he's kind of thought of in that same neighborhood. All of these guys have great offensive schemes. They're creative. They're great to pair with quarterbacks. They're very quarterback friendly. McVay is that, but he's also an unbelievable program builder and culture builder and leader and hirer. All of his defensive coordinators and all of his assistants. And whether it's McVay or Les Snead, and those two were kind of paired together, and that staff, look at how good they are at identifying young talent, defensive talent. They haven't missed on a defensive draft pick in years. And they've needed to hit on all of them because up until recently, they haven't had all their picks. Like, I think so highly of Sean McVay. And if Andy Reid wouldn't have been paired with Patrick Mahomes, we wouldn't think of Andy Reid as some bum. But we would be living in a world today where it is widely believed and accepted by all that Sean McVay is the best coach in the NFL, and it's not close. And I that was my number one takeaway from last night's game. My number two takeaway from last night's game, Kevin O'Connell. I want to play you this clip from John Middlecoff, who does a podcast every week with Cowherd. He has his own podcast on The Volume. I believe it's called 3 and Out. It's very good. I like listening to his reaction videos that he posts after games. This is what he had to say about Kevin O'Connell in his podcast last night. You can find the whole thing on YouTube or Spotify or wherever.
Kevin O'Connell, who, if you just listen to the media, and listen, I got nothing against Kevin O'Connell. Seems like a nice guy. But he is treated by the football media like he's Bill Walsh meets Mike Shanahan meets Mike Holmgren. He has played in 3 big games in his career as a head coach. 2 years ago in the playoffs, he won the division, won 13 games. They hosted the New York Giants. Daniel Jones, he lost. Last week, to get the number 1 seed against the Detroit Lions, he got worked. Tonight, as a favorite, on the road, kinda, the Rams were displaced from LA, had to move their entire family. I've lived in Arizona for about 3 years now. There are a ton of Vikings fans. That was a Minnesota home game.
I like Kevin O'Connell. I think he's great. So if you were a Vikings fan that's listening to this because you live in Wisconsin and you're like, all right, I'm not a Wisconsin sports fan, but this Grant guy, he's fine and he has good takes, or at the very least, he's entertaining and I'll put up with his Wisconsin homerism. I like Kevin O'Connell and I think he's great. And I would hire him to run my team if I needed a coach. I wouldn't hire him before McVay, or I wouldn't hire him before, some other guys, but I would hire him. He can be my coach. I think he's tremendous. But rewind to 2 weeks ago when Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings beat Matt LaFleur and the Packers, and so many made such a big deal about Matt LaFleur's sideline demeanor. And Rob Reichel wrote a column about it. Basically said Matt LaFleur was wetting his pants on the sideline. Meanwhile, look across on the other side, Kevin O'Connell, I believe he compared him to a modern-day cool-hand Luke, right? And after that Vikings game, that game for the Packers was the final opportunity to beat another elite team, because we just weren't going to see it against the Bears. That wasn't going to matter, right? The Saints game the week previous, that didn't matter. That Vikings game was the last game on the schedule. Prove it against an elite team. And the Packers fell on their face. So a lot of Packers fans that week were saying, Matt LaFleur can't win the big one. He's not a big game coach. Well, I just want to point out, and I pointed this out 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was, coming off the Vikings game, I pointed this out. Guys, I know Kevin O'Connell is the coach du jour, and it seems like his team is the team of destiny, and he gets him up for big games. At that moment in time, he was 0-1 in playoff games, and the loss was a home loss to Daniel Jones when he had Kirk Cousins, who was playing well. They had won 13 games that season, I believe. That was Kevin O'Connell's only playoff game, and he got pantsed by Brian Dable and Daniel Jones. Since that Packer game, and since we've had those conversations about Matt LaFleur can't win the big one, he can't coach the big game, need a big game coach like O'Connell, they went on to Detroit to get blasted, weren't prepared for the rush, weren't prepared for what Aaron Glenn had in mind, they weren't prepared for any of it. They were shell-shocked. And then they were shell-shocked again last night. So I'm not saying that Kevin O'Connell stinks and he's overrated. I think Kevin O'Connell's great. This should just serve as a sober reminder for Packers fans. Anytime we're thinking, oh, Matt LaFleur, God, he's not it. He can't win the big one. He's a lesser opponent, merchant, all of these things. Again, who are the big coaches in the NFL? Who are the big game, big moment coaches? Andy Reid? Okay. McVay, I think, although they've lost playoff games too. Most coaches have. Most coaches to make the playoff a lot. They lose, right? The only active coaches who have won Super Bowls, and I remember doing this a couple weeks ago, are McCarthy, who most people think pretty lowly of, John Harbaugh, and it's been a while, and people are wondering, when are you guys going to break through? Tomlin, who hasn't won a playoff game in a million years, and a lot of people are like, that's got to end in Pittsburgh, right? The rest of the league is filled with coaches like O'Connell or like LaFleur, who have had lots of success and won lots of games with mixed results in the postseason, because that's mostly what most coaches are. And Andy Reid, again, before he got Mahomes, was that as well. Can't win the big one. You can't win the big one until you win the big one. I want to acknowledge this tweet before we take a break and we'll get to your calls. Scott tweeted and said, without Reid and Mahomes together, Shanahan has 2 Super Bowls and he is considered the best coach in the NFL. That's an interesting theory, right? Back to my point of, if not for the pairing of Reid and Mahomes, we'd all think of McVay as the best coach. I fully believe that. I fully believe that the only reason Shanahan doesn't have 2 Super Bowls is because of Patrick Mahomes. If he would have played against anyone else active in the NFL, I think he has 2 rings. So that would change how we view things as well. But my point remains, I think McVay is a program builder in a way that Shanahan isn't. I think Shanahan's an outstanding schematic coach and maybe a little bit better than McVay, but the whole shooting match with McVay is just it's just so good. And I think somehow he's become underrated, and that's all I could think about last night, watching O'Connell and watching McVay. Now, that's not to say that Matt LaFleur is perfect and Packers fans should all love him, because I really, really disliked his end-of-season presser earlier today. It was about 40 minutes long. I cut some highlights. We're going to get into that at the bottom of the hour. I'll play those for you. And if you have any thoughts on last night or what's currently going on with the Packers, now a couple of days removed from Sunday, I will take your calls next. 608-321-1670. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Kevin O'Connell, who, if you just listen to the media, and listen, I got nothing against Kevin O'Connell. Seems like a nice guy. But he is treated by the football media like he's Bill Walsh meets Mike Shanahan meets Mike Holmgren. He has played in 3 big games in his career as a head coach. 2 years ago in the playoffs, he won the division, won 13 games. They hosted the New York Giants. Daniel Jones, he lost. Last week, to get the number 1 seed against the Detroit Lions, he got worked. Tonight, as a favorite, on the road, kinda, the Rams were displaced from LA, had to move their entire family. I've lived in Arizona for about 3 years now. There are a ton of Vikings fans. That was a Minnesota home game.
I don't play that cut to slander Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell's excellent. I clipped that, and I wanted to play it at least to begin the show as we're reacting to last night's game before we get into the Packers. I play that as a sober reminder to myself and my fellow Packers fans and owners. It's like, yeah, even if you think Matt LaFleur is not some great big game coach, I'm not sure O'Connell is. I'm not sure. Dan Campbell, I think, is. But what if Dan Campbell fourth downs his way out of a divisional round game? People are going to change their tune on Dan Campbell really quickly, who I also think is good. The league is filled with lots of good coaches. And if those good coaches are around long enough and they make the playoffs a good number of times, the results are going to be mixed. Because winning in the playoffs is really, really hard. And we've seen that for Kevin O'Connell, who everybody loves. Everyone thinks he's brilliant, great coach, great leader. He's had 2 playoff games, been blasted in both by Daniel Jones, and in a de facto home game against the Rams is a favorite. And then last week against Detroit, not a playoff game, but a huge gotta-have-it game for seeding purposes, for a first-round bye, right? That game was everything. So Packers fans, look, there's a lot that I don't like about Matt LaFleur right now, and we're going to get to that in about 10 minutes. But to say that, well, he's not a big game coach. They need someone like Kevin O'Connell. Okay, well, if you're not watching on the live stream, the simulcast, I'm gesturing broadly. Look at the games. Other than McVay and Reed, who are the great big game coaches in the league right now? I could argue that there aren't any, because it's a lot of good coaches who win lots of games, but also in the playoffs lose some. It's a mixed bag for most guys, except the all-time greats. Well, Reed and McVay, obviously, but those are the top 2. We live in a world where we're compared our coach against everyone else, and it's all pretty similar. It's a mixed bag all around. 608-321-1670. I'm going to get to some texts here in a second, but first a call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Wow, first out of the gate. Kind of surprised.
Well, I started the show with Vikings Rams. I don't know that there's 10 people listening right now who are like, I got to give my take on that. We haven't gotten into the Packers yet.
Well, I'm just fascinated by the continued Daniel Jones. Like, how many times have we heard the name Daniel Jones on the show to start in the first 27 minutes? And it's all circling back to a playoff game where he played like an MVP caliber quarterback in the playoffs. And I think the theme that Vikings fans more than anybody should have learned this year, that every quarterback in the NFL is really freaking good at football. And if they get the right coach and the right circumstances and the right scheme and good receivers, anybody can put up a really good game.
Yeah, well, especially one good game or a good run, but certainly one good game. Oh, yeah. Matt Flynn, another good example.
Daniel Jones led the Giants in rushing in that game. He had 17 carries for 80 yards, 300 yards passing, 2 tutties. I mean, the Giants were on fire. Shout out Brian Dable, another name that, kind of surprisingly is kept, right? The Giants have regressed every year under his tenure, but you look at the quarterback disaster that he's had with Daniel Jones getting injured last year. Obviously, Danny DeVito coming in, beating the Packers. But that's another head coach that I'm kind of comparing. When you're thinking about Kevin O'Connell, you're thinking about the young head coaches, or young in tenure at least. Brian Dable out there, kind of interesting. But
I think the Giants would have. I think John Mara would have fired both the GM and the head coach if he hadn't already had to fire a bunch of other guys. Like I think they have their jobs because the guys before them were so bad and were also kicked to the curb quickly. I don't think Mara wants to fire anyone. I don't think he wants to be the owner that keeps firing guys, and that's why he's kept that group. I think that's the only reason why.
Well, Brian Dable also showed that he can win a playoff game with the Giants roster, which is insane.
I think he's a good coach, but good coaches get fired all the time. To your point, yeah. You're driving at something. You're going somewhere. I'm gonna sit back and let you get there here.
Well, there's a lot of people that are just ushering in, right, and making sure that they plant their flag, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's the phone calls. I'm sure later tonight we're going to hear a couple of them, that they are making it very clear. Like Grant Bills and his Aaron Ashby stock, they are absolutely not selling any of their Jordan Love stock.
Yep.
And I'm here today, bad Vagabond John take for 2025. I'm not selling my Daniel Jones stock because the amount that he's getting brought up on these airwaves, in the Packers Twitter space, all of the comps and all that's going on here, I think he's going to have some sort of a Sam Darnold resurgence on some team somewhere. And I'm not selling it. It's not worth a lot, but but I'm not selling.
Well, yeah, you don't stand to make a lot if you sell it. Just like my Ashby stock, why would I sell it? It's not worth anything. I think last night might be a good thing for the Vikings in the long haul because now they can move off of Darnold and go into next year if they want. If I were Daniel Jones and I don't know where his contract stands, I would sign a 1-year deal. And if McCarthy's not ready, they can play Daniel Jones. I think he would probably be very solid, if not awesome, for a year. And then if they feel that they can go to McCarthy, they can, or they can look for their next guy. You know, people have pointed out that the Vikings now, Aaron Rodgers might make sense. Why? They just did it with Darnold. They could do it with Daniel Jones, and they don't have to invite the whole Rodgers circus, which I'm not taking shots at Rodgers, but Daniel Jones is a lot, there's just a lot less with Daniel Jones.
Correct. And I know you're getting to Matt LaFleur here. So I guess my question for you, Grant, as we're, preparing to really dive in deep on Matt LaFleur, is there a chance that with the schedule next year, the home schedule, where you're getting like an all-star lineup of opposing quarterbacks coming to Lambeau Field next year, which is just insane. Shout out season ticket holders. Hopefully you guys show up. But if the Packers don't take a step forward, do you think Matt LaFleur's job is at risk in any way?
Yes.
Or do you think he still has a couple of years?
No.
And,
no, there's no coach in the world that's like, they've earned the right for a couple of years. Matt LaFleur is earned the right for next year. Absolutely. And any talk that they should fire him this offseason is silly. But if they do this again next year and they regress and we see a lot of the same issues, yeah, his job could be in jeopardy. And you could say that about just about every single coach in the league, I think.
If you are putting takes out there for 2025, January is getting started. Here's my take. Here's what I think is what is going to happen. Not what I want to happen.
Okay.
To be clear out there, I'm not trying to be negative, Vagabond John today, but I think the Packers take a huge step back next year because of the schedule and because of the awesome teams that they're playing against. They're playing the AFC North, not the AFC South. And I think that's going to lead to Matt LaFleur getting fired. So I'm putting it out there right now. This is what I think is going to happen. Hindsight's 2020. This is my foresight. I'm putting it out there now so I can reference it later, but we'll see.
I like when people plant flags. I enjoy that. We can revisit that. That's Vagabond John. I would need to look at the opponents. I'm also leery of judging a schedule in, January because things change, right? You think this team's going to have a hard schedule or an easy schedule, and then you get to the season, it's like, well, actually, guys are hurt or things have changed or teams that you thought would be bad or be good. But to Vagabond John's point, right, quarterbacks, right, you can expect that to be stable. Like, I don't think Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, I don't think those teams are going to be awful. I think at the very worst, they can be very competitive and difficult to beat because of the quarterbacks. And the Packers played a lot of teams this year, especially in the AFC South. There's just not a lot of certainty at quarterback, not a lot of quality there, or the backup quarterback in the case of the Niners who were injured or the Rams who were beat up. It's just hard to judge a schedule. But oh my God, if they have a bad season next year and it's a lot of the same coaching issues with LaFleur, yeah, his job's in jeopardy. Just about every coach in the league would be in the same spot. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll hear a little bit from Matt LaFleur. Really got a hair across my rear end for some of the things that he said and the way that he said those things earlier today. So I'm going to bring you some of that audio next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Mike Clemens in 1 hour. He was out in Philly. Could talk about what the atmosphere looked like, sounded like, smelled like. If he noted any smells, I guess we'll get those details too. And what he heard immediately after the game from the coaches and the players in the locker room. Now, Mike was traveling back today, so he wasn't in the Packers locker room for Matt LaFleur's end of season presser, which is what I want to get into now. And I tweeted earlier that there just wasn't much that I liked from this presser. I don't know. Let's just get into it. And I guess it will become explanatory. There are about 8 answers from this 40-minute presser that I saved. I put them into 2 folders. The first folder is labeled Matt LaFleur, details, coaching. To me, in 5 different answers, about 5 different things, just this team's lack of attention to details, the little things, the execution became so apparent. Let's start with Matt LaFleur. He was asked about Jordan Love's 3 interceptions in Philly. And I cut just the part of the answer, him specifically breaking down these interceptions. Listen to this.
The pick that Slay had, that was a heck of a play. I think just you want to talk about the little details. I mean, we had an opportunity to stack them. Yeah, the ball was a little inside, but we got to make sure that we stack in that situation. So I don't know if you guys saw the slow-mo. I mean, it was a great job by him grabbing his wrist, slingshotting himself, and he made a hell of a catch. The second pick, again, details. I mean, that route's got to be run at 20 yards. We're at 15 yards. That ball should never be in that far. So, like, I saw what Jordan saw. I mean, there's an open hole in the defense. But when you're not at the right route depth, bad things happens. And then the last one, I mean, I don't know what you guys thought.
So I cut off the end about the third interception because it was a prayer that was hucked up to Bo Melton. I don't care about that one. In both of those descriptions of both of the interceptions, what did he say? Well, we had an opportunity to stack Darius Slay and we didn't. I don't know what that means, but he's describing an opportunity to do something differently, a little detail that they didn't do. It wasn't a perfect throw, but it wasn't a miserable throw, right? We had an opportunity to stack. We didn't do it. He describes the second interception. He says that route's supposed to be run at, what do you say, 15 yards, and it was supposed to be 20 or vice versa. They're 5 yards off. That's not a little, it's huge. So you have a wide receiver who's 5 yards off on his route. And then on the previous one, an opportunity to do something against Darius Slay that they didn't do. So the little things, the details. Here's a question and an answer, I guess just the answer. The question was, do you think this team needs veteran presence? Do you think they need older guys? Because it's the youngest team in football, and there's some advantages to that. But with all this talk about, messing up the little things and not being ready to play and execution, like, do you need more veteran presences on this team?
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't think, I mean, that's just a number to me.
That's just a number.
I just think you obviously you want as many good players as you can get. And whether that guy is 22 years old or 32 years old, I don't think it really truly matters. I mean, there's always something to say for experience, being in those big moments, being in the playoffs with 2 years in a row with that crew. I think there's a lot of experience that comes along with that. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we got to play better in those moments. We can't have the critical turnovers. We need everybody on the details, because I think I said this to our team for sure.
I don't even need to listen to the rest. That made my point. 40 seconds is plenty. No, age is just a number. Doesn't matter to me. These guys have plenty of experience. They've been to the playoffs twice now together, played a lot of games. They need to be better at the little things. Doesn't matter if you're 22 or 32. Okay. So age isn't an excuse, excuse me. Inexperience isn't an excuse, at least not one that Matt LaFleur's citing. Okay. There's Matt LaFleur when he's asked, do you think you have enough talent? Is your roster good enough? Or did you have shortcomings that prevented you from winning these big games?
Absolutely. I think we got a ton of talent. Can you always add to that? No doubt about it. And I think when you look at just going against Philly, I think that's one of the arguably maybe the most talented roster in the league. I mean, they're pretty darn good. And just is what it is.
Well, okay. That's not a confident way to answer a question or finish an answer to a question. Asked, do you have talent shortcomings? Could that excuse your failures down the stretch?
Absolutely. I think we got a ton of talent.
You have a ton. Okay, so the talent's not the issue. Inexperience isn't the issue. How about, let's talk about the usage of that talent. Tucker Kraft seems like that's a pretty good player. I believe it was Tom Silverstein asked, could he be your Kittle or your Travis Kelce? I believe that was the question.
100%. And I think that's on us to make sure that we find him and feature him, because he is, I mean, when he gets the ball in his hands, you feel him. So if there was an area that we got to do a better job on, I would say featuring the tight end.
Okay. So just to recap, we have played 4 sound bites so far. One was about Jordan Love's interception, which he said on the first 2, because the last one was kind of a prayer. Who cares? The first 2, there was an opportunity to stack a corner. Don't know what that means, but that was a missed opportunity and a little detail they didn't get right. And then on the second one, there was a route that was at 15 yards that was supposed to be at 20 or vice versa. Who cares? It doesn't matter. They were 5 yards off. Seems sloppy. Not much attention to detail. Maybe poorly coached. Then he was asked, well, this team is really young, Matt. We get it. Mistakes will happen. Do you think that they need more of a veteran presence on this team? No. Age doesn't matter. That's just a number. That doesn't play a role. So it's not because these guys are young. Maybe they're just not being coached very well. He was asked, do you have enough talent? Or do you need certain players on this team? Matt said, oh yeah, we got a lot of talent, plenty of talent. Okay. So that talent maybe needs to be coached better. When asked, hey, can Tucker Kraft be like a George Kittle or a Travis Kelce for you guys? 100%. And that's on us. We got to get him the ball. Okay. So Matt LaFleur in 4 answers outlining ways that he and his coaching staff let down his players. These are his words. I'm not exactly putting a ton of spin on these words either. I'm basically repeating in simpler terms what he's stating out loud to the media. Last Matt LaFleur question that we'll get to. Jason Wilde towards the end of the presser asked, Matt, it seemed like the stretch run last year, the last month or so of the season, guys were schemed open all over the place. Just think of that Vikings game, how wide open. I remember that on New Year's Eve. Didn't really seem like that was the case down the stretch this year. Why?
It all depends. It's interesting when you go back, and I think this is worth looking into as well. Like, teams had different ways that they were going to defend us. Like, obviously, Philly was going to hold a shell for the majority of the game and make you be really efficient offensively and say, you got to block these creatures up front. And we didn't do that well enough. The Vikings had played a bunch more man in that game. So it's interesting. And I do feel like teams did a little bit more of maybe went off profile a little bit. And so we got to look into why was that the case. But yeah, it doesn't feel good when you end like that.
Well, yeah, we all understand that last part when you crash and burn at the end of the year. But Matt LaFleur saying there, yeah, a lot of these teams, they just did things defensively that were surprising, caught us off guard. And again, to go back to the Vikings game, said, yeah, we didn't think they'd play that much man. Okay, so you were out-coached and out-schemed. And then in the game, once you realized what was happening, you weren't able to adjust. So I just played you 5 answers that he gave from earlier. It was a 40-minute press conference. 5 of the answers that he gave that I selected about how we weren't paying attention to the details on both of Jordan Love's interceptions. We don't need more veterans on this team. The youth is fine. Okay. We have plenty of talent. We're not lacking talent. We need to do a better job getting Tucker Kraft the ball. That's on coaching. And other coaches outcoached me in the biggest moments. So there's 5 answers that Matt LaFleur gave today that basically screamed to me through my computer screen as I watched. The coaching wasn't good enough. The coaching regressed. I was telling you this yesterday before this presser. I said, look, I understand with a second-year quarterback and some young players, some regression. Maybe our expectations got a little too high. I mean, after all, they still won 11 games. How mad can we really be? But the one thing that I can't get over and I can't explain, and I'm not really ready to accept, is how their coaching regressed so much. Their 6th-year head coach, who's tenured longer than any coach not named, I believe it was Shanahan, McVay, Reed, Harbaugh, and Tomlin. That's it. Maybe I'm missing one, but that's about it. LaFleur regressed so much this year, and I have 2 more comments that I want to play you from this press conference, but let's take our break first, and then maybe we'll have time for a call or 2, and then we'll get back into more phone calls after 5 o'clock as well. Plenty of time. Mike Clemens still yet to join us. A lot more of the Wisco Sports Show coming up.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes.
Keyshawn yesterday said.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, Mike Clemens, in about a half hour. He's in Philly. He can tell us more about what happened on Sunday. I'm telling you a little bit about what happened earlier today in Matt LaFleur's presser. I assume most of you have lives and jobs and weren't able to sit down and dissect 40 minutes of Matt LaFleur's coach speak at the podium. But that is my job. Not really a real job. When my boss figures that out, it's going to be a tough day for me. It just played you 5 comments in that last segment that really highlights, I think, Matt LaFleur's regression, his staff's regression in 2024, their inability to get these guys focused on the details, their inability to clean up the little things. And Rick on the live stream poses a good question. Can we blame Steno at all? Right? Or he's not going to tell the truth. He's not going to throw his players under the bus, right? You can't blame the players. I get all that. But after 18 weeks, if the coach can't get the players to do it, then I question if the coach should get the players to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that, I just think that's on a coach. 1 week, you can be like, yeah, the players messed up and they made mistakes. Over an entire season, what are you practicing? What are you telling him in meetings? That's just a lack of command to me. A couple of other Matt LaFleur comments. These comments hit to something else I also don't like. He was asked, do you feel close? Do you feel close? I know you guys just lost and your season didn't end well, but do you feel like you guys are close? Here's Matt LaFleur.
I think right at the moment, you don't feel it. But again, I think, we won 11 games. I know it was good for third place in our division. It's one of those crazy years, man.
Crazy years.
I just think we have to be a little bit more consistent, and especially in those big time games. You can't turn the ball over. You got to find ways to move the ball. You got to maximize your opportunities. I mean, I think Brandon's been a great addition for us, and he misses a 38-yarder. Just why did that happen? I don't know. I mean, it just happened.
What does that mean?
It unfortunately happened.
What are you talking
about? I
about?
got a lot of confidence in the guy, and he was a great addition to us and really helped us. So everybody has got to play their best, especially your best players got to play their best in the big games.
I would agree. And I think that falls on coaching. Why did we get into Brandon McManus? A guy who was only available on your team because he did some things he shouldn't have done on a plane with a flight attendant. Why'd he miss? I don't know. And to say, well, it's just kind of a crazy year. What? You have other good teams in your division? That's not a crazy year for some teams. Other divisions are good. There are some divisions in football where there's multiple good teams every year. I know that hasn't been the Packers' reality for a long time, which I've talked about plenty this year. It's like, I don't think this team or this fan base is equipped for other good teams in the division, teams that are here to stay, teams that are well run. Here's Matt LaFleur asked, do you need a wide receiver 1? Did this year make it clear to you we need a number 1 wide receiver?
I would say it just depends on the situation. I know. I'm sorry. I know you want a better answer than that, but
I know you want a better. See, I'm also questioning. Like, do you think this is some kind of joke? Your team kind of crashed and burned down the stretch this year. Wasn't ready to play against Philly. You got beat by the Lions twice. Beat by the Vikings twice. You lost to the Bears at home, and then you were mostly non-competitive on offense in a playoff game. Like, is this joke hour for you? Is this Saturday Night Live at the podium? Here, I'm going to play you the video clip of when he was asked about Keyshawn Nixon, saying he doesn't want to return kicks anymore. So if you're watching on the simulcast, pay attention to his face, his facial expressions.
He doesn't want to return kicks anymore and he wants to be a number one corner.
It was interesting.
Are either of those viable?
Well, Keyshawn and I have a really good relationship, and we have a meeting today to talk about this. So I love Key. I do. I love how he competes. I love how he prepares. He's, not sure why he said what he said.
It's the comedy store. 1265 Lombardi. It's the new Laugh Factory. Dude, your team pooped down their leg the final month. And then your player comes out apparently against the team's wishes yesterday and said, I don't want to return kicks anymore. I wonder why he said that. Interesting. I'll have to talk with him. Yeah, you probably should. Matt, you know what? You probably should. You probably should talk to your player. Like, there was a lack of urgency. There was a lack of seriousness. It says so on the live stream. I thought Green Bay was still title town. And I understand that you can't win the Super Bowl every year, but I don't love the idea of my head coach chalking up finishing third in the division to, it's one of those crazy years. No, it wasn't. They're good teams. You got time. Let's take a quick call. Thank you for waiting. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Ed McGuanago.
Ed, hey, what's up, Ed? It's been a bit.
Not much. Long time.
What's going on?
I think one of the things I was taking away from the press conference was it seemed like a lot of the guys were asking him about play action.
Mm-hmm.
And his response just seemed kind of like what you're saying, like with the joking. It just seemed like so coy. It was like, play action? Like, what is this play action you speak of, sir? I've not heard of this.
And
I should look into this further.
Part of his answer was like, well, does it count if it's play action if we just put a guy in motion, but we're still... So I understood Matt LaFleur. What the big picture takeaway was, Matt, it seemed like you didn't utilize a lot of tools that you've utilized in the past, and you just dropped Jordan Love back to let him rip it, and it didn't work. So why? So that was the concern, and I don't know that Matt LaFleur had a great answer for that. I didn't think he had many great answers today. He had one, and it wasn't really a great answer. It was an explanation, and I'll play that coming up.
Well, and I think he knew a lot of people were going to be asking about that, and he was just like, roll off, But the other thing he explained away in terms of the play action was he said that statistically speaking, that they had better run percentage out of the shotgun than they did under center. And, I have a problem with that because, like, how do you know? Because if you're scheming guys open and you're getting more high percentage plays downfield, doesn't that also open up the run game?
Yeah.
That to me doesn't make sense at all.
And Bill got caught up in this. Ed, I got to go. I appreciate it. It's a good call. And thank you for getting us to 5 o'clock. And I'll talk more about some of the things you said on the other side of the hour. Sorry to short you. I thought the Packers ran it out of the gun really well. I think there was lots of evidence that really worked with Jacobs this year. And I know a lot of people are like, get under center. They should be under center. Well, maybe. I know that's conventional thinking, but I do think the data supports that. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. We got to get a 2-minute break. 2 minutes, no commercials. An update from Zach Heilpern, hour number 2, the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, Matt LaFleur held his end of the season press conference this morning. Packers coach hit on a lot of topics, including the slow starts that plagued them, the inability to snap out of a late season funk, and some comments made by players in recent days, namely Keyshawn Nixon saying he no longer wanted to return kicks. But he also left his players with a message as they headed their separate ways for a few months.
It's one thing to say it. We got to be about the action. And that's another message I gave to our team is like the expectation is when you leave today, and you come back when we start our off-season program, that you're going to be better, not only physically better, but mentally better than when you left today. I feel like that is a reasonable expectation for everybody, and I expect that. But there's got to be action behind that. You can't just talk about it. You got to go do it.
One piece of news was that quarterbacks coach Tom Clements is retiring. He's the only one to have coached Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love. LaFleur said it's possible his replacement could come from within. LaFleur also said he has not spoken with quarterback Jair Alexander about his comments on potentially not being in Green Bay next year, but he hoped to speak with every player here in the next couple of weeks.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, it's game day for the Bucks and the Badgers. Milwaukee going to look to get back on track after losing in New York over the weekend when they take on the Kings tonight at Fiserv Forum. Tip there is set for 7. And the 24th-ranked Badgers looking for a 6th straight win. They host Ohio State tonight. The Kohl Center tip is at 8. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
These are the games that matter. He knows that. Every quarterback that plays in this league knows that. And when you get into these games, that's what you're judged on. And it's not all on him. There were a lot of people that contributed to them not playing better last week and then again this week. But ultimately, the quarterback, especially more so in today's game than ever before, the quarterback is expected to overcome those things. And so it's a tough way to finish. I said it during the ball game. It doesn't really matter if you win 14 games. Not that you got to go win the Super Bowl because only one team gets to do that. But when you don't even win a playoff game, you're lumped in with all the teams really that didn't even make the postseason. So this is a tough one. And for Kevin O'Connell with a good team again this year, had one 2 years ago, to come away without a playoff victory is a hard pill to swallow.
2 receivers left. Rams blitz. Darnold gets away from it. Steps up in the pocket. He's holding it too long. Just run. Throw it, man. Just run. At the 25-yard line, he's sacked for a 5th time.
It's so This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Mike Clemens, 30 minutes away, 35 minutes, something like that. It'd be nice to reconnect with him and talk about what he heard and saw in Philadelphia on Sunday. We've been dissecting Matt LaFleur's presser from earlier today. I think Matt LaFleur's a good coach. I think he had a bad year. I think he regressed big time this year, which disappoints me more than the wide receivers not taking a big step. It disappoints me more than Jordan Love not taking a big step because Matt LaFleur just finished year number 6. And he's been to the playoffs 5 times. He's no stranger to big games. He's no stranger to having a good record at the end of the year, having to kind of contend with, all right, our seeding might be like, how do we want to do week 18? He's done all this before. And Matt LaFleur regressing this year, that's at the top of my list of things that concern me. And again, this is towards the end. He was asked about Keyshawn Nixon. And if you're watching on the simulcast on the video stream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you can see the video as well. I just hate this. This stinks to me. I don't like this. Here it is.
Want to return kicks anymore, and he wants to be a #1 corner.
It was interesting. John and I have a really good relationship, and we have a meeting today to talk about this. So
let's hope so.
I love Key. I do. I love how he competes. I love how he prepares.
I'm glad.
He's, not sure why he said what he said.
Yeah, I'm not either, but that's not my job to know, buddy. That's yours. It's not my job. We're going to meet later today. You probably should. You two should probably sit down. I didn't like the tenor of the whole presser. Every other answer was an example of why the coaching staff wasn't good enough. There wasn't enough emphasis put on details. The details win the biggest games, right? Ask Tom Brady, ask the Patriots. That's how you win playoff games consistently, which is really hard to do. And then to make light of a couple of answers and to be joking and laughing. Look, I don't want everyone to come across as miserable, but this team collapsed down the stretch. They lost to the Bears at home for the first time in forever. They couldn't take an advantage of another opportunity in a second attempt at the Vikings. And then they show up to Philly. They fumble on the first play of the game, and the offense it's not that the offense started slow. The offense, for the most part, no-showed. And the Eagles' defense is good. I'm not an idiot. But, Matt, Packers fans, and owners like myself, have a lot of concern about the way this season ended. And we're trying to figure out how we should feel about it all moving forward. And this whole routine at the podium today, it's not what I was looking for today. It's not what I wanted to hear. And to hear the explanation of, we finished third in the division, but it's just one of those weird years. Do you think the Lions are all of a sudden going to get bad? Do you think Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, who are a well-run organization, I know they don't have Super Bowl championships, do you think that team's about to go to the bottom of the barrel? You should be thanking your lucky stars that the Bears are as clueless as they are, even though you almost lost to them twice too. I think Matt LaFleur's a good coach. I'm not saying the Packers should fire him. I'm saying that he had an awful year. I hated his press conference today, and he's about to launch into a very important offseason for his coaching future and for the future, the immediate future of this era of Packers football. To your phone call, 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric on I-90, good evening. Sorry about your team last night, buddy.
Disappointed.
I knew that's what you're going to say.
Disappointed.
Sorry.
You know, you don't have to be sorry, Grant. I mean, this is how it runs. You know, you're not that disappointed, and I wasn't that disappointed. You know, when Philadelphia won. But that all being said, all right, Sam Darnold, he's holding on to the ball to make throws that only Jordan Love can make.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, this Paul Allen drop. I love Paul Allen. I don't like the team. Yeah. I don't like the Vikings. Although this Vikings team is about as likable, even for a rival fan, as you can have. That's a hilarious piece of audio.
It is, right? And he's holding on to the ball, and I'm like, this isn't Braveheart, okay? You're not going to hold. It's just throw it.
It's so good.
Throw the ball away.
Poor guy.
Even Matthew Stafford can be almost down on the ground, and he knows just chuck it forward a little bit. Just chuck it forward.
Just flip it.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
My hat's off to Matt Stafford. My hat's off. I think the guy's a Hall of Fame quarterback, actually.
I think he's real close, which 3 years ago I couldn't have even conceived. I wouldn't have even gotten close to saying that. But he gets a good playoff run here, and I'm almost there with you.
Man, I'm going to tell you, what a release. What a release. I mean, that guy can get rid of the ball. And that first drive, and they drove it down there, he escapes from the pocket, super smooth, running to his left, sidearms it to the right. And the guy's wide open, but it's still a hard throw.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. You know,
yeah.
It was a thing of beauty. I have to say it. It was.
And I think, Eric, we'll talk more about the week. I just got loaded phone lines. I'm sorry, brother. I hope you and yours, Miss I-90, are doing okay with what's happened to your Vikings. That's why I think Jordan Love should watch a lot of Matthew Stafford tape. It's like that's his goal. Be that guy. You're going to throw some picks. You're not always going to be perfectly accurate, and you're going to have games you go, man, that kind of stunk. But when it's on, it's as good as anybody. Matthew Stafford, when he's hot and playing his best, is as good as any quarterback in the league. He can't sustain it for long stretches for entire seasons, which is why he's never been thought of as a potential MVP, really. But for a playoff run like we saw a couple of years ago, and maybe we're beginning to see now, I don't think the Rams are nearly as good as the Lions or the Eagles, but we'll see. I think Jordan Love should say, how can I mold myself after that guy? How can I try to build my resume and my career after that guy? That's my path. That's what Jordan Love should look at. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Tony from Texas.
Hey,
Last
Tony.
night, I think Sam Darnold was looking like prime Sam Bradford. Remember Sam Bradford when he was on the Rams back in the day?
Yeah, and on the Vikings, too. And I think he got off to like a hot start with the Vikings one of those years. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, just a statue. And I think he had the highest contract ever for a rookie, if I'm not mistaken. And they had to change the rules because he sucked so bad.
Good memory. That's a great memory, Tony.
Yeah. So, Matt LaFleur sounds like a guy with a lot of job security. Pretty cocky, huh? No respect for the press.
Well, look, I understand that I understand.
Grant?
What were you saying? Sorry.
Condescending, very condescending.
He rolled in there and he's smiley and it was just very laissez-faire. I'm not asking him to be pissed off and to be crying, but come on, man, this season did not end well at all, and people are concerned.
No pressure at all. No pressure. There's no pressure on him, and he has no respect for those people that are covering football, which he acts like is rocket science, when you and I could just pick up things. And he doesn't like the fact that some of these writers and these beat people actually know a little bit about football, like your guy Pete, and they'll push back a little bit.
Doherty? Oh, I love Pete. Pete's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Lafleur's awesome.
He's a killer.
These
He's
guys
gonna be
that
on
push
with Bill
back
later
actually-
this week. I'm really excited. That'll be really good radio.
Yeah, so he doesn't like the fact that you know a little bit about his business. Like, I'm superior than you. He doesn't like that. But, you're talking about the details, and you're on fire today, by the way. I love it. I love the tone. I was talking to Jermichael Finley today, talking about the Packer game. And I was talking about his career and the Packers in the classroom and what's more important, the classroom and the practice, part of it.
Yep.
And he said, believe it or not, he said the classroom.
Yeah.
And I go, name one guy that just did not live up to the billing because he just didn't have it in the classroom. He said, myself. He said, I didn't do enough of the details, which is what the Packers were lacking. The false starts, the pre-snap penalties, the lack of focus. And, McManus being brought up was just kind of comical. I mean, that was just funny. I think Matt's just trying to search for something, But that's what happened. The lack of focus. Green Bay, because there's so much to do, they weren't focused somehow. I mean, come on.
Tony,
imagine if lacrosse had a team. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no kidding. Or River.
Oh, my God.
Remember back in the day, Tony, you can speak to this, I bet. Didn't NFL teams used to come up and practice in River Falls, and teams used to come up here?
Hey, the Cheese League. I can name every Cheese League team.
So the Chiefs, the Saints, what others?
The Chiefs, the Saints. We had the Jaguars for a cup of coffee. We had the Bears, the Packers. Hell yeah, I went to some Cheese League games. Boring as hell, but I went to it.
But it's cool to go. It's cool to see it. It's like spring training. It's not the most electric thing in the world, but it's fun to go and be a part of it. Tony, excellent call. You're cooking this week. I was talking to Jermichael Finley. Love Tony. Yeah, that's an angle that I hadn't thought about. Like, that is a man that is very comfortable and secure in his job. And I think he should be. I'm not saying they should be on the hot seat. But going into next year, like, if a lot of this repeats and it feels at the end of next year, like the Vikings and the Lions are still above us in the division, we're going to have some questions. And if people call in and say they should move off of Matt LaFleur, I'm not going to tell you that you're out of bounds for suggesting it. I might still disagree. I don't know. We'd have to see how the season goes. But next year is a huge year for him, and this offseason is a huge offseason. And to come into the press conference today after you blew it against the Vikings big time, blew it against the Bears, a lot of it was his own hand in the final minute, and then no show in Philly on offense, your side of the ball, and then to do a presser about, well, we got to get better at the details, which coaches are responsible for, right? And, Keyshawn Nixon, I don't know why he said that. I'll have to talk with him. Yeah, I think you should. It's just not a good look. Just a lack of urgency and a lack of concern, and there should be concern. And it shouldn't just be chalked up to, kind of a wild year. There were other good teams in the division. Come on, it's more than that. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Ralph in Ridgeland.
Ralph, son of a bitch. What's going on, Ralph? I've been to the chicken toss in Ridgeland. It's electric.
It's a good time.
It is.
No doubt about it. No better way to spend a Friday night. I just get a kick out of the whole Packer fan and analyst and reporter discourse, because the minute anybody, and I'm kind of on your wavelength, Grant, with LaFleur, he didn't have a very good year. He's a good coach, but he didn't have a good year. The minute that you say that you don't call for his job, but you say something kind of against LaFleur or kind of criticize him, if Matt LaFleur was fired, he'd have a job in 20 minutes. Well, that could be true, but that also doesn't mean that whatever he's doing wasn't something that you can criticize him for.
Yes.
Or the Packers, they had a terrible end of the season. The last 3 weeks were not competitive, not good. But they won 11 games. Yes, they won 11 games, but they also played the AFC South, the worst division of football by a lot. They racked up 4 wins there. Yes, they had 11 wins. That's not bad. That's a pretty nice season, but it didn't end well. So, but then you say that it didn't end well. Well, you're part of entitled town. No, they had 11 wins in mid-December. I don't think it's too much to ask to win 1 or 2 more games in the regular season, then maybe be more competitive in the wild card. This whole kind of everything is either great and rosy or terrible. Both of those outlooks are wrong. But it's like it's devolved into politics.
Yeah. Well, and I listen to a lot of sports talk radio, and the cliche thing for Wisconsin sports hosts this week is Was Matt LaFleur perfect this year? No, but to want him fired is ridiculous. To say that he should be on the hot seat is ridiculous. That's not a take. That's not a take. There's real criticism to be levied against Matt LaFleur. No, I don't think he should be on the hot seat, but I think this offseason and next season are huge for the direction of this team under him, this era of Packers football, the way that the money and the draft picks and the youth, the way that all of this is lined up. You can't regress again next year. He can't have a season next year as a head coach, as a leader of practice, and as a game manager. He can't have the same season next year that he just had.
There's no doubt. And the other thing is, it's a win and loss week. Your record is what it is. They almost lost to Jacksonville. They almost lost to Houston. They should have lost to the Bears a second time. Those are, just because you win doesn't mean that you made all the right decisions and that you didn't have some poor coaching in there. I'm not calling for his job, but just to say that, well, he'd have a job. Well, yeah, guess what? There's not 32 good NFL head coaches out there. Of course he would have a job.
Well, no, there's not. And also, I think Matt LaFleur would get a job. I don't know. I think he would. I would also say, and anytime someone says this is always my response, Ralph in Ridgeland. Thanks for the call. Anytime. Well, if he's fired, you have a job tomorrow. I thought that about McCarthy. I thought that about Vrabel. I've thought that about lots of guys. Belichick. And then they don't get jobs. So if Matt LaFleur was fired, I bet he would have a job tomorrow, but we're always so certain of that, and it oftentimes doesn't work out that way. Let's take one more call, and then we got to get to a break because I want to get to Clemens on time. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Yeah, it's Tom in La Crosse. How you doing, Grant?
Hey, Tom. I'm doing great. What about you?
Good. Yeah, I'll like the previous caller. He took a couple things. I mean, 11-6. We beat two teams that were in the playoffs. The Rams were beat up when we played them. I don't think we would have beat the Rams last night. We beat Houston, who sort of got into the playoffs by default, although they're still going on. They're still playing, but I don't know. I just wonder, who's our guy? Who's our guy in offense? I would guess that's Brandon Jacobs. I think we have an emerging guy on defense in Edgerrin Cooper. But where's really the heart of this team? I just don't know who it is.
Well,
besides maybe those two guys, I just don't see the passion. I don't see the leaders emerging, and I think part of that falls on LaFleur too. But I don't know. I look at next year thinking, whew, 8 wins.
I mean, it could be. I don't like parsing out a schedule this far out in advance, but I think it's fine to look at the season, Tom, and be like, look, they did a lot of good things. The running game that they built, and they got another year of experience, and they're still young, and they got a lot of emerging players. I still feel good, but it's also okay to go back through the year and nitpick and say, well, let's not get too comfortable because look who they played. And I think it's fine to look at the season the way that we're looking at it. I don't think that makes us haters. I don't think that makes us entitled. But then again, I expect a lot from my sports team. They're the 13-time world champion Green Bay Packers. It's called Titletown. It's still called Titletown to me, Tom.
Yeah. Well, and I think something you just said, I think is absolutely right on. They need to go into this offseason and say, hey, we can't get comfortable here. What do we need? I think we need more talent. I heard what Matt LaFleur said, but I think we need more talent.
Well, and I think they need to do a better job developing and maturing the talent they have, especially wide receiver, because that was the group that really I was expecting a lot more. And that's my biggest disappointment with this team outside of coaching. Players on the field, I was hoping for a leap from that group, and we didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, great chatting. Go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go, Tom. I appreciate it, Tom, on La Crosse. Let's take a break. 3 minutes. We'll come back. If you're on hold, I promise I'll get to you. I just want to get to Mike Clemens on time, so we'll be right back. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I thought offensively we did a lot of great things. I know we were statistically one of the better offenses. It doesn't feel like that right now because we had some poor performances towards the back half of the season, and that is disappointing. And I think more than anything is we were really good when we got explosive plays, and we weren't very good when we didn't get explosive plays. And I think if there's something from that is if you're not generating those explosive plays, you better be extremely efficient. You better stay ahead of the sticks,
Bingo.
Convert on third down, be in those third and manageables, or but it is harder, obviously, to matriculate the ball down the field with 10, 12, 14 play drives. It's just harder that way.
I thought that was the best piece of football analysis that we got out of Matt LaFleur's presser earlier today, and I think he's right. It's a good explanation for why a lot of the advanced numbers and big picture numbers, the cumulative numbers that kind of look at the whole season, they would tell you the Packers offense took a huge leap this year. And I think in some ways it did. But they struggled to create explosives. So you can be great at moving the ball 4 or 5 yards at a time, but if you're going to live like that and win games like that, you need to avoid penalties, you need to be really detailed, and you need to execute at a high level, and they did none of that, at least in their biggest, most important games, and that's why they were 1-5 in the division. They should have been 0-6 in the division, and that's kind of why this press conference today climbed up my ass. It's like you're going to stand up there with a smirk and laugh and joke, and look, humor is a good weapon in a stressful situation. Trust me, I am aware. I didn't like the lack of urgency, the lack of seriousness. I didn't like the demeanor of it all. You kind of fell apart down the stretch, and you explained 6 ways till Sunday in a 40-minute presser why the detail was not good and the coaching wasn't enough and how you needed to be better. And, Nixon cocked off yesterday. I don't know why he said that. I'll have to talk with him. Yes, please do. Like, I don't know. I guess I expect a little bit more. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello. All right, I'm going to put you back on hold. I'll try again in just a little bit. To the text line. In the meantime, this text says, did all the self-scouting help? Many coaches brought in to point out flaws. That's the thing. They brought in Saleh. They brought back Luke Getsy at one point. I understand that with a young team, there's going to be rough spots and rough patches and mistakes. I also think Edgerrin Cooper might have just been their best player by the end of the year, so it's tough. Well, we're young, yeah, but when your young players also are awesome, like Bullard brought down Saquon Barkley in the open field, shedded a block, tackled him by the ankles. Okay, so can we complain about youth? Evan Williams was so important to the back end of your defense, so can we complain about youth? Edgerrin Cooper, again, might have just been your best player at the end of the year. So I don't know that it's fair to complain about youth. And Matt LaFleur, to his credit today, didn't complain about youth. He said, no, age is just a number. That doesn't matter. But when you say that, you're admitting it's an us problem. We can't get these guys to lock in on the details. We can't get them to focus. It's not their fault. It's not that they're young or inexperienced. It's on us. It's on coaching. And it would be one thing if it was just the young guys, but it was the veterans. Zach Tom having his worst game at the worst time, and Josh Jacobs fumbling in the worst moment of their biggest game of the season up until that point. It's just a mess. 608-321-1670. Let's try again. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. It's Coyote Mike.
Coyote Mike, good evening.
Good evening, sir. So that wasn't me before. I just called in now. So I'm going to go really quick because I know you got Mike coming up. But Matt LaFleur, number one, I thought after his post-game press conference, I thought he sounded relieved. And today I thought he was really nonchalant about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not say one thing in there that gives me hope for next year. That's my opinion. You know, I didn't hear him say anything like, we are going to eliminate the mistakes. We are going to play our football and not let other teams dictate to us how we should play. Because some of those answers he was giving, like, well, it depends on the situation. Every game is different. It's like, Matt, don't you pick a lane and get into it and line your horses up and go for what you're supposed to be doing. This seems like the whole season was that back and forth. Well, should we run? Should we pass? Should we pass? Should we run? You know, and then I texted you that comment from Tucker Kraft after the Viking game. I don't know if you saw it.
What did you say? I'm sure I saw it. There's so many texts, and now between calls and live, I only got 2 hours to get to it all. Remind me what you said.
Yeah, he says all we need is to be pointed in the right direction, and then the light will come on, and you'll see what happens. You know, then the light will come on.
Yep.
And I was thinking, like, what does that mean? Does he think they're not getting enough guidance from within the team or by the coaches or who or God or what?
Yeah, whoever.
You know?
Doesn't matter
and
to me.
that's just judging on some of his comments now, I think the words he uses, because those he made in the locker room yesterday, they were directed at some of the guys that he plays with.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, Mike, because we all watched and heard Tucker Kraft's comments yesterday. Why am I getting more frustration and intensity from a second-year tight end from a town in South Dakota of like 60 people than I am of my sixth-year NFL head coach who's coached Aaron Rodgers and was an inch from the Super Bowl at one moment in time?
Exactly. I got the impression today too is that I don't mean this to sound bad, but sometimes I go, does Matt LaFleur even know what he's doing sometimes? You know, it's like he's trying to pick the right scheme. Maybe he's trying to mastermind everything too much. And just it's gotten overcomplicated for him this year, and he'll bounce back. But like I said, he didn't say one thing today that gives me hope that, you know, yeah, there's going to be a different team walking on that field next year.
Yeah.
And I hope that after this, you know, maybe things will turn around during the off season. You know, I like to see him pull it out, but I don't know. There's a lot of red flags for me right now.
Yeah, I don't understand how you couldn't have red flags going into this offseason. I appreciate it, Mike. We got to get to Mike Clemens, from Coyote Mike to Clemens Mike. He'll join us next. Thanks to the Bay Motel in Green Bay. He was in Philly for the game, and he wasn't in Green Bay for Matt LaFleur's presser earlier today. He'll be there for Goody later this week. But he told me earlier this afternoon, he said, I'm going to sit down and watch LaFleur's presser now, get all caught up, so we can discuss that as well. But we can talk about Philly as well. Mike Clemens will join us next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I still feel the same disappointment. I feel like that I felt post game. And I mean, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. You just want to go out in those moments and play your best. Let the chips fall where they may. When you go out there, I thought we had a strong defensive performance, and we didn't get it done offensively. had a really hard time blocking their front. So it's hard to get really anything going in that regard. The turnovers were just absolutely killer. Started with the opening kick. That was it right there. You're not going to go on the road and win a playoff game when you're -4 in the turnover battle. It's not going to happen.
It's Matt LaFleur from earlier today. Let's start there. Mike Clemens is joining us thanks to the Bay Motel in Green Bay. And Mike, I'm sure you were missing the Bay Motel the last couple of nights. You were out in Philly to watch the Packers season come to an end. He said he feels the same way that he felt after the game. The first thing that I said to begin last night's show, Mike, as we reacted to Matt LaFleur's postgame presser, he didn't seem as distraught as I've heard him after previous playoff losses. And to me, maybe he just knew deep down that this team didn't have it in him, because he did not sound to me after that loss like a coach that thought, oh, this was a Super Bowl team and we just blew our shot.
No, I got news for you. The Matt that you see at the podium sometimes is the Matt in the locker room, the Matt that you walk along with to the team bus is passionate, full of emotion, anger, frustration. He's a grinder. He's all into it. He's asking questions like, what do you think of this? I mean, he's open to it, but he also has certain takes that you might say, I don't know if that's something you got to worry about. I mean, he's far more animated in person than what he gathers himself so that he doesn't have some sort of a breakdown in front of the cameras and the microphone, which is not to say there's anything fake about it, because there's a lot of things that he says at the podium that if you're really paying attention to it, are pretty open and honest. And so when he, puts the blame on himself, he's doing that in front of his bosses.
Yep.
He's doing that in front of Mark Murphy. He's doing that in front of, critics in the media. He's doing that in critics on social media, fans and whatnot. But he feels that there's, if he's going to go down, he's going to go out honestly like that. And he doesn't cover up many things. The cards that he won't show you, he won't show you because he does want to tip off opponents, and he's far more close to the vest on those things, maybe sometimes than McCarthy ever was, or Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. Aaron would practically show you a game plan sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's you have to temper what you see at the podium. But today he talked for almost 45 minutes, and it was a lot of good stuff. There was a lot of good stuff there.
He didn't seem overly distraught, like I said, and he didn't after the post game either. He didn't feel that way on Sunday night. He seemed pretty comfortable and at peace with it. And he took blame for a lot of stuff. I'm aware that it's a press conference and a coach should take blame. That's how it works. And a press conference on some level is a performance. It's a public relation performance. Do you think behind closed doors, he feels like his players needed to be, you know what I mean? Like, he's got to think on some level, I need my guys to go out there and run the right routes. I need my linemen to hit their blocks. I need to, even if he might fall on the sword a little bit more publicly, he's got to feel differently. What do you, in what way do you think he feels differently, and about what things, I guess is my question.
When coaches and quarterbacks and lead players say, I got to look at the film, they got to look at the film. I mean, there's things that they're talking about during the game. They're looking at pictures and they can't understand why things are necessarily failing, or exactly, did Keyshawn Nixon actually fumble, or, was there a bad call there by the refs because we didn't see it on the scoreboard because we're on the road? There's those kinds of questions. But he certainly knows when things are not working, when he sees his quarterback under pressure, when he knows that his guys are getting beat up. Let me take it. Here's the other thing. I wrote this in my notepad. I was going over my notepad today.
Okay.
By the way, the season came at just the right end, because you know how I use those little black spiral notebooks to take notes in press conferences and then during the game. It got to be the fourth quarter, and I turned the page and I realized this is the last page in this notebook I've kept all year.
It's meant to be.
It's like I haven't got room for the divisional playoffs. My notebook is full, man. Season is over.
It's fate.
But just as it turned to the fourth quarter and there was a timeout, I looked, and it was after Josh Jacobs had scored his touchdown. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm saying, all right, 14:56 left in the fourth quarter, and you lost Christian Watson last week. You lost your left guard, Elton Jenkins.
you lost Romeo Dobbs, probably your most reliable hands out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And now you just lost Jaden Reed, who, told me, which got picked up by, some of the print media. Yeah, he dislocated his shoulder. So right away you're saying to yourself, and he's, LaFleur's probably got an idea on some of these things in the middle of the battle. Like, he's not going to have a team next week.
Yeah.
That's forced. And that's before your center goes down with a fractured leg.
Yeah.
And Josh Myers. And now, so they come home on the team flight. And it is still a young team. And it's you wonder if the girlfriends are saying, so if you guys lose this weekend, can we take a vacation next week and
Sure.
get out of here? Listen to the frustration of Tucker Kraft cleaning out his locker yesterday and saying, I can't believe the crap that's coming out of these guys' mouths. Here's Tucker Kraft.
We couldn't finish. That's what I think of this team. We're all sitting in here in this locker room with frowns on our faces, people packing their shit up, ready to go home, people talking about the off-season vacations, and that's just a crock of shit, man. We should be getting ready to play the next game, in the postseason. So that's my opinion on it.
Appreciate it, Tucker. Thank you.
Am I wrong to be a little concerned? I know that press conferences are a performance. Am I a little bit wrong to be concerned that Tucker Kraft is so frustrated and this is clearly such an unsatisfactory result to him? And then I watched LaFleur at the podium today and he's, kind of cracking jokes about things that Keyshawn Nixon is saying. Like, I didn't get a lot of urgency. I didn't get a lot of frustration for a season that ended in a very frustrating way. I didn't like that. And Tucker Kraft is the complete other side of that coin.
Well, that's something the man has to make adjustments for, because that might be a little immaturity. These players tried hard. They tried their best. They got beat up. They saw some of their teammates go down left and right against a very physical Eagles team. And they lost Dean, their linebacker, for the rest of the season too, to a serious injury as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a very, very physical game.
Slay was banged up. Yeah, guys were leaving and coming. I mean, they just got Jalen Hurts back.
These guys were throwing, man. These guys were throwing punches through that game. But emerging from the smoke, and Matt was right on about this morning, Grant. And that's this. Let me give you a slice of what Jordan Love is like. You guys know what he's like, at the podium. I told him a story. I said, I'm watching this Milwaukee Bucks game the other night, and there's 2 seconds left. And one of the assistants to the assistants has got a video board on him. And he's like, I think they were playing the Raptors. And he said, hey, look at this. The Raptors, they were on the road last night. They had this exact same scenario with about 2 seconds left. And here's where I think they're going to inbound from. Look, and then he was able to actually play them the video of that. So you could see Giannis and Doc Rivers looking at that video and saying, okay, all right, so if that's what they do, then Giannis, you cover this guy and this. And it worked. And the Bucks were able to hang on and win that game. And I said to Jordan, wouldn't it be great if you could actually watch video in game? Because they still can only just look at stills. They can't look at video.
That's so weird. I didn't know that. I figured they could watch highlights on the iPads.
Those tablets are looking at stills.
That's so stupid.
That's why they're always looking up at the scoreboard. That's the only motion that they're actually seeing.
Interesting.
And Jordan Love says to me, and this is just one-on-one hanging at his locker, he goes, see, anybody on a team can help out. I mean, he is the most optimistic, positive, inclusive guy ever, as opposed to, the future Hall of Famer before him, who was always like, this guy's doing this and this guy's not doing his job here, and we're not holding this guy. That's what Aaron would do, was he would whisper to you, all the things that aren't working or the things that are being glossed over. And Jordan Love stands up and says, see, everybody can chip in. We can all be part of a winning team. He's so positive. Mm-hmm. And today, Matt LaFleur publicly came out and said, the quarterback's got to get on after people. If you make a mistake, he's got to hold that route runner accountable or that blocker accountable. And that's one of the things on his to-do list. Also, Tom Clements is stepping down as quarterback coach. He's, he's in his early 70s. When they brought him back to Green Bay like 3 years ago, he was happily retired in the wine business in LA and in Arizona. Well, he came back, and tried to help, Aaron Rodgers, and then these last couple of years with Jordan Love. But he's been here for 3 years for Jordan Love, and I assume that they want, out. But also, LaFleur said, Jordan Love, injuries or not, he got out of his better footwork. And I think they want to find better ways to get him to motion. And I asked Love this question a couple of weeks ago, and I'll be honest, I picked it up from Dan Orlovsky on TV, where he said, why isn't Jordan Love running with a football a little more often? So I asked that in the press conference. And guess what? LaFleur had, Love had a couple of runs in the next game. Like if you're standing back there and everybody's covered, and of course he's been protecting himself between the knee and the groin injury, and you saw him with one keeper the other night against the Eagles. But they probably, if everybody's covered, if they're running a deep shell, too deep coverage, well then run with the ball and slide. But you do things to move the chains, just like your competition did, and Jalen Hurts, or certainly what Lamar does with the Ravens. So that's something that they're definitely want to work on. Also, with all the breakdowns, I mean, they were physically beat by a very physical defensive line. And, I talked about that pregame, man. Everybody's talking about other things. Well, Zach Bond is become a hell of an inside linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
But, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, those guys are tough up front, and they were beating up your offensive line. And so, again, when they announced that LaFleur's going Tuesday morning, like, oh, wow. See, because what he's going to do is he'll talk to the key players and, like Love and all that before they get out the door.
Nixon, hopefully. Sounds like they should probably chat about some things. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
continue.
Yeah. And he's not talked to Jair yet, but he promised, I'll be talking to Jair Alexander as well. But he went through he reviewed the film with his staff so that he could review the game today for the media. But he held that thing because now he goes into closed doors and it's an assistant coach one at a time, and maybe a couple of players if they're still around, like a Tucker Kraft, and holding everybody accountable. What do you think went wrong? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And then by the end of the week or by this weekend, he's got to decide, do I have to make a coaching position change? Do I need to freshen up here? He's probably already had in the back of his mind a depth chart of other guys, but I would not be surprised if he makes a change or two to address some of these things. But obviously, Hafley overall had a pretty good year.
Yeah, and I think they got better every week, right? They were better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning. I like seeing that, especially from a first-year coach. And it's not like his personnel got way better. They got some reinforcements on Sunday for sure. They got Evan Williams back and Quay Walker, who I think, Quay Walker's taken a lot of slings and arrows from Packers fans. He was out there on what seemed to be a busted up ankle. I think Quay Walker deserves a little bit more credit from Packers fans than he's gotten this year.
I was surprised that he was still limited last week. I saw him walking across the locker room 10 days ago, and I thought, oh man, he's not coming back anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, they're limping. They're limping like the spirit of 76 soldiers, into battle. So those are just some of the early takes I had of what happened. But I'm telling you, to see Elton Jenkins and watching him after he got hit, he got drilled in the shoulder by number 3, the linebacker for the Eagles defense.
Is that Nakobe Dean or is that
Nolan one? Smith?
Nolan Smith. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was a pull play. Okay. So the left guard, Elton Jenkins, comes out, turns to his right, and is pulling down the right-hand side. And he's going to try and trap a guy or hit any incoming guys on the right-hand side to open up a hole off the right tackle for Josh Jacobs. And instead, this linebacker is kind of in space. Number 3, Nolan Smith, it's a clean hit. It's a legal hit.
Yep.
But he takes his helmet and drives it into Elton's right shoulder, and his arm immediately drops.
Yep.
And I thought, oh my God, that's a snapped bicep. No, it was such a bad neck stinger that even after the game, he had to have his teammates help take his shirt off. Like, that could be a really serious injury.
Yeah.
And then Josh Myers with his big gash on his shin and a walking boot and crutches and probably a hairline fracture was the last thing we heard. Another serious concussion for Romeo Dobbs, a guy who was put on the Guardian cap after he banged his head on the end zone against the 49ers, bangs his head in the end zone at Lincoln Financial Field, against the Eagles. I mean, he could be concussion prone now moving forward. They got beat up.
Mm-hmm.
They got their asses whooped in this thing.
Yeah, and now we look towards the offseason. So Goody speaks on Thursday. Are we going to be able to chat about that on Thursday night?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's make that a plan.
All right,
Make
awesome,
that a
Mike.
plan.
I appreciate it. We'll look forward to you on the Huddle with Bill tomorrow night.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Safe travels. Glad you got home from Philly. No one yelled any slurs at you or anything when you were in Philly. Nice to have you. Always appreciate it. He's on Twitter at Mike Clemens NFL. When we come back, a little fun at the expense of Paul Allen and the Vikings, and we'll wrap up the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Darnold back to pass. The pocket is claustrophobic and he's sacked. It is Byron Young and Kobe Turner converging on Sam Darnold, and they're going to sack him back at about the 17. That's a loss of 11 or 12 yards. It's 3rd and 22 for the Minnesota Vikings, and this Monday night has started in disaster-like fashion for the Purple and Gold. Sam Darnold out of the shotgun, Aaron Jones by his side, 4 receivers. Darnold steps away from pressure for a second, but then he is sacked back at the 30-yard line. It's a loss of 6. Jones, the tailback, play action to him. Here comes a blitz, and down goes Sam. Sam sacked Cody Durant in his third year from South Carolina State. And that is a loss of 12 yards. It's now 3rd and 15 for the Vikings. Darnold back to pass, sacked 3 times, dropped the ball. It's a strip sack for the Rams, and it's picked up by Jared Verse, and here comes the rookie. Inside the 30 to the 20 to the 10. Touchdown, LA Rams. 2 receivers left. Rams blitz. Darnold gets away from it. Steps up in the pocket. He's holding it too long. Just run. Throw it, man. Just run. At the 25-yard line, he's sacked for a 5th time. Looking to get a 3-5. Darnold takes the snap on 4th down. Bounces around in the pocket, and he's sacked for a 6th time. The Rams have hit the pick 6 with sacks in the first half. 1st and 10 from the Ram 45. Addison in motion to the left, back to the right. Sam back to pass, and he's taken down for an 8th time. 8 sacks on Sam Darnold. You know, those hits add up, but at some point they get 57 as he gets sacked again. Yeah, sacked up. And again, it's like it's to Ben's point. He's just not letting go of the football. You know, he could have thrown that football easily, but decided not to. Right, and took another sack. Well, that's 9. So that's a sack 9 times. 9 for today. I mean, that's an epic number. He's holding it too long. Just run. Throw it, man.
Paul Allen's such a legend. All 9 sacks. The play-by-play for each one. The Vikings Radio Network presented by Polaris. KFan radio credit. I was listening a little bit to Vikings Fan Line last night. KFan does a good broadcast. Callers are fired up. Hosts are good. And I just like sports radio. Shout out to Paul Allen. What a legend. 9 sacks. I actually think could end up being a blessing in disguise for the Vikings, because now maybe they don't turn around and give Sam Darnold a huge bag of money. Although, you know, the pushback to that would be, well, the best case scenario would have been Sam Darnold continues to play awesome. They have their quarterback, they pay him, and then, you know, they win playoff games and contend for a championship. So maybe a little bit of cope, but I think a legitimate cope, right? The Vikings know, okay, probably not going to be Darnold. And if McCarthy's not ready, well, maybe Daniel Jones or fill in the blank journeyman quarterback who's available. Why would you not want to go play for the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell with those weapons and that environment? Like, that's where I'd want to go. So I don't think they'll be on Aaron Rodgers. I know a lot of people are throwing that out there. I just think the Vikings are smarter than that. And I like Rodgers a lot, but why would you go for Rodgers when you could have someone younger, who's less dramatic, who's probably going to be more sturdy, maybe less injury prone? I don't know why that would make sense. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers would do it. And I said that on Rock Mornings with Brian and Gene this morning when they asked about it. It's like, I don't think Rodgers, I think Rodgers would retire before go play a one-off for Minnesota or Chicago. I could be wrong. And if those teams want to offer him money, maybe he would. I would be surprised. We'll continue this tomorrow. Badgers basketball against Ohio State tonight. Greg Gage will go up on Twitter and Facebook right after the game. Enjoy. Talk to you tomorrow at 4.